The CIA created the perfect tool for every criminal on the planet, the Darknet, the Tor Onion network. And in 2026, this surprises no one. I told you everything about its creators once, and that hasn't been a secret for a long time. But have you ever stopped to think about something else? Not about who built it, but about who owns it now. Who holds the keys today? I thought there simply was no answer, that the Darknet has no master, and that is its entire essence. How wrong I was. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today I will show you who is actually standing at the doors of the Darknet and why anonymity is the most expensive illusion in the world. I never used to wonder who exactly controls the Darknet today. It seemed like a question without an answer, like asking who owns the wind, a network held up by thousands of volunteers around the world. No office, no director, no sign on the door. I was sure that was its strength, that you cannot take away what no one owns. And then I came across a single figure. I stumbled upon it by accident in an old report by an independent researcher, and at first I didn't even understand what I was reading. I read it 3 times. The number didn't leave my head for 2 weeks, because if it is correct, then everything we think about anonymity in the Darknet turns out to be exactly the opposite. I will tell you this figure, but not now. First, we need to understand how this network is even built, and why the question of its owner turned out to be the most uncomfortable one I have ever asked. Because the deeper I dug, the clearer one thing became. The Darknet truly has no master in the sense that a factory or a bank has a master. No one signed any papers, no one profits from the network itself, and that's exactly why it turned out to be much worse than if there were a master. A thing without an owner has no defender, but there have been plenty of people over the years willing to quietly stand at its doors. Thousands of servers stretched across dozens of countries, an onion armor of 3 layers of encryption, and a promise for which millions of people came to this network. The promise that you cannot be found. I spent weeks breaking down who is actually keeping this network afloat, and what I found scared me, but first things first. Let's start with the facade, with what almost everyone believes. 8,000 servers. That is what holds up all the anonymity of the Darknet right now, in 2026. Not millions. 8,000 machines scattered across the world, and someone turned each one of them on voluntarily. Remember this number. We will come back to it, and then it will sound completely different. But for now, let me describe the picture that an ordinary person sees when they first hear the word Tor. A picture that is beautiful, orderly, and almost entirely false. Tor stands for the Onion Router. The name is not accidental. When you enter this network, your request does not fly directly to the site like in the regular internet. It is wrapped in several layers of encryption, like an onion, and passes through a chain of other people's computers. Each one removes only its own layer and sees only a piece of the path. One knows where the signal came from, but doesn't know where it is going. Another knows where it is going, but doesn't know where it came from. None of them see the whole picture. Sounds like perfect armor. That is exactly how it is sold. Millions of people came to Tor for that very promise. Journalists in countries where you can go to prison for an article. Activists who need to pass on documents and stay alive. Residents of states where the internet is filtered like water through cheesecloth. And yes, alongside them came the dealers, the scammers, and those whose business cannot stand the light of day. The network doesn't ask who you are. That is its principle. And that is where the main myth is born. Since no single server sees the whole chain, it means you cannot be tracked. Ever. Under no circumstances. Anonymity is absolute. I believed it myself for a long time. Russia, by the way, has been among the leaders in the number of daily Tor users for years. Tens of thousands of people go there every day, and each of them is sure of the same thing, that the onion armor will protect them, that they have dissolved into a crowd of 8,000 servers and become invisible. A beautiful theory, I would have gladly stayed in it myself, but every armor has a seam, a place where the layers meet. And in the case of the Onion network, this seam is not somewhere in the middle, hidden deep inside. It is at the very edges, where you enter the network and where your signal exits back into the regular internet. The network sees the entrance, the network sees the exit, and the whole question of anonymity boils down to one thing: who is standing at these two doors? I went to see who holds them, and the first thing I realized is that there are pitifully few exit doors in this network. Out of 8,000 Tor servers, only about 2,500 are exit nodes. Think about it. The entire network, through which, according to various estimates, a colossal share of the world's illegal traffic flows, is funneled into a bottleneck of 2,500 machines. These are those very exit doors, and there are catastrophically few of them. To understand why this is important, let's break down the path of your signal. In general terms, without technical details that aren't needed here, when you enter the Onion network, your traffic passes through 3 points. I will call them doors. The first door is the entrance, the server that first receives your signal. It sees your real address, your real face on the network, but it doesn't know where you are ultimately headed. The second door is in the middle. It is only needed for one thing: to break the connection between the first and the third. It knows neither who you are nor where you're going. It simply passes the sealed packet along. And the third door is the exit, the server that releases your signal back into the regular internet, to the site you were going to. It sees where you're going, but it doesn't know who you are. There it is, that very Onion armor. As long as these 3 doors are held by different, unrelated people, the system works. No one sees both sides at once. Your identity and your goal are torn in the middle, like a sheet of paper ripped in half, where the halves lie in different cities. Sounds reliable, almost too reliable, because all this beauty rests on one quiet assumption: that the entrance and the exit are held by different people, that the person at the first door and the person at the third are not acquainted, have not conspired, and will never merge what they see into one picture. But what if it is the same person? If someone is standing at both the entrance door and the exit door simultaneously, the Onion armor ceases to exist. They see your face at the entrance. They see your goal at the exit. All they have to do is match the time, volume, and rhythm of the signal, and the two halves of the torn sheet fold back together. The mask is off. You are no longer anonymous. You are just a person with an address who visited a specific site at a specific minute. This is called a traffic correlation attack, and it is not a theory from a textbook. It is the main root vulnerability of the entire Onion network, known to experts from the very beginning. Now remember the figure. There are only about 2,500 exit doors. The fewer exit doors there are, the easier it is to occupy a noticeable share of them. You don't need to control the whole network. You don't even need half. It is enough to stand at the entrance and the exit, so that with a significant probability, both doors on your path turn out to be yours. And that is where I asked myself a simple question. Who is actually holding these doors? Who are these people who voluntarily turn on a server, pay for electricity and traffic, and let someone else's anonymous flow pass through their machine without receiving a single penny for it? I thought finding the answer would be easy. The network is public, the list of servers is open, just take it and look. I was wrong. And it was on this question that my investigation almost ended at the very beginning. Because when I started to find out who is standing at the doors of the Darknet, it turned out that a good portion of them have no name at all. No contact, no trace, as if someone was trying very hard to remain invisible in a network that everyone already considers invisible, and this someone was not alone. Someone had been adding hundreds of their own servers to the Tor network for years, without a name, without contacts, without a single trace. I stumbled upon this when I was trying to answer what I thought was the simplest question. Who holds the doors of the Darknet? The list of servers is open. I opened it and started looking at who's behind them. Every server in the network has a field where the operator can write how to contact them. Email, nickname, anything. Most honest volunteers fill it out. They have nothing to hide. And so I was scrolling through this list and saw that for some servers, this field was simply empty, time after time. Hundreds of machines that have neither a name nor a face. Someone set them up, paid for them, configured them, and left them silent. At first I thought I had hit a dead end, and it was a frustrating dead end. You see the problem. The network is designed so that anyone can really operate in it. That is its principle. Any person on the planet has the right to set up their own server and not leave any data about themselves. This is not a violation. This is the norm. Not only are the users anonymous, those who hold the network itself are also anonymous. And it turned out that my question was meaningless. Who owns the Darknet? Well, no one. Thousands of scattered volunteers, half of whom are fundamentally nameless. Asking which one of them is the master is like asking which drop in a river is the main one. The trail crumbled in my hands. I sat in front of a list of thousands of servers and realized that there is no master here, and there cannot be one by the very design of the network. I almost closed this topic, honestly. I already thought that the story wouldn't come together, that the answer to the question in the headline sounded boring and short. No one. Let's go home. And then it hit me. I was asking the wrong question. I was asking who holds the majority of the servers. But that doesn't matter. In a network of 8,000 machines, it doesn't matter who has the most. Something else matters. Who holds the right ones? Who is standing at exactly those doors through which your signal is most likely to pass? And who, most importantly, can stand at both the entrance and the exit at the same time? As soon as I reformulated the question, the dead end disappeared, and in its place emerged a figure that made me feel uneasy. There was one person, not from the intelligence services, an ordinary independent network researcher who had been monitoring these nameless servers for years. He noticed a pattern back in 2019, and then, by pulling the thread, traced it back to 2017. Someone had been methodically, like on an assembly line, adding hundreds of servers without contact data to Tor all this time, hundreds of machines in the ranks simultaneously, in data centers around the world. The researcher gave this actor a code name, a dry alphanumeric code, without any pathos, just a label in his tables. And here's what was most disturbing about this figure. Most of those who set up malicious servers in Tor gravitate toward the exit. That's understandable. At the exit, you can intercept traffic, steal, or swap in fakes. There was, for example, one particular operator who ran thousands of exit servers with a single goal: to swap out crypto wallet addresses in other people's traffic and intercept their transfers. Greed. Simple, understandable, human. But this nameless actor behaved differently. He almost never touched the exit. He sat on the entry and middle nodes. And that changes everything. At the entry and in the middle, there is nothing to steal. People don't sit there for money. They sit there for one reason: to see who enters the network and to map where they move inside it, to strip away the masks. The researcher himself described this actor with extreme dryness. The level is not amateur. He acts persistently and systematically. And behind that dryness, you could read what he didn't dare to say outright. A hooligan doesn't look like this. A structure with resources and patience looks like this. Someone with very deep pockets spent years paying for hundreds of servers around the world without making a single penny of profit, all while carefully hiding their name. People don't do that for fun. You don't pay for hundreds of machines for years just for the hell of it. And that's when I realized that the network itself, those 8,000 servers, the onion, the encryption, all of that is only half the story. Because a server is not a spirit in the cloud. A server is an iron box that sits in a specific building in a specific city and consumes electricity for which someone pays the bill. And that means the question of ownership has a second, much more grounded side, not who holds the abstract doors in the network, but who holds the concrete itself upon which all of this stands. And it was there, in the world of concrete and data centers, that the names, addresses, and one particular story were hidden. A story that made the word freedom stick in my throat when applied to the Darknet. In 2019, German police entered a former NATO military bunker, underground, behind armored doors, to shut down a part of the Darknet physically, with their own hands, just like turning off the lights in a room. Remember this image: a bunker, not a cloud, not a virtual space, not a territory of freedom. Concrete, metal, and server racks in a dungeon. I lived for a long time with a misconception that most people share. I thought the Darknet existed somewhere in nowhere, that it was smeared across the network and not tied to a place. That is a convenient illusion, and it is false. Every site on the Darknet, every platform, every forum, physically lies on an iron server, and the server stands in a building, and the building stands in a country that has laws, police, and borders. And this is where those known as bulletproof hosts enter the scene. These are companies that rent out servers and fundamentally ask no questions. They don't care what you keep on those servers. They ignore complaints. They ignore requests. They choose countries where it is harder to reach them, and they sell one simple promise: whatever you host here, we will not hand you over, and we will not shut you down. Sounds like a service for insiders, and that's exactly what it is. That very German bunker was exactly such a place, and its history is one you want to double check. It's so much like a movie. It was run by a man who bought a decommissioned military shelter built for the Cold War. Thick concrete walls designed to survive a strike, autonomous power, protection from any disaster outside, an ideal place to hide what shouldn't see the light of day. He went several floors underground and packed those floors with server racks. Outside, a quiet hill. Inside, the humming heart of a whole chunk of the Darknet. And here is what was running on those racks: the second largest illegal marketplace on the Darknet of its time, not counting everything else that had been dragged there over the years. A platform where they traded in things sold in the darkest corners of the web, working calmly from a concrete dungeon in the middle of a peaceful European country. For years, the owner of the bunker sold his clients exactly that promise. They won't get you here. I have a bunker. To shut it down, the authorities didn't have to press a button somewhere in the network. They had to physically storm an underground fortress. Hundreds of people. An operation prepared for capturing a dangerous facility, not for taking down a website. And when they went inside, it turned out that the heroic territory of freedom was a damp basement where other people's crimes were stored on racks like jars in a warehouse. Freedom turned out to have an address, a hill, concrete, and a staircase going down. And this is not an isolated case. This is an entire industry. Take a firm from St. Petersburg, which was sanctioned in July of 2025. According to investigators, for years it rented out infrastructure for other people's dark deeds, serving, among others, ransomware groups and those who stole passwords by the thousands. Servers for ransomware programs that block hospitals and factories from working and demand a ransom. Servers for data theft. All of this ran calmly on rented hardware until sanctions hit the firm. And what did it do afterward? It simply changed its sign and continued working as if nothing had happened. That is the whole point of such a business. It is almost impossible to kill because it is not tied to a name. One sign is closed, another opens tomorrow. The hardware is the same, the people are the same, the clients are the same. Only the nameplate on the door changes. And this industry has a long pedigree. Back in the 2000s, one network was notorious. And when it was finally shut down amid a scandal, it turned out that a huge chunk of all the world's spam was passing through it. One provider, most of the world's junk traffic. When it was pulled from the socket, Spam all over the world dropped noticeably for a time. One node, a global effect. Remember that feeling. We'll need it now. And now, the most important thing. This world of physical hosting is not organized like thousands of independent owners scattered across the planet. It is compressed. A huge portion of dark platforms runs on a handful of providers in a handful of convenient jurisdictions. And when one such node falls, a great deal collapses at once. Want to see how compressed it is? In November of 2025, police in the Netherlands took down one such hoster. They seized about 250 physical servers in 2 cities, and along with those 250 iron boxes, thousands of virtual servers that were running on them went down at once. 250 machines, thousands of platforms collapsed in one go. One building, one night, so much for a territory without a center, so much for a network that cannot be shut down. And since we're talking about exit doors, I'll show you what happens when an ordinary predator stands at that door without any intelligence agencies involved. Just a greedy person who understands how the network is built. There was one such operator. No name, of course. Researchers gave him a dry label. He held not 1 or 2, but thousands of exit servers in the network simultaneously. Why so many? For one simple trick. When a person transferred cryptocurrency and their traffic exited through this operator's server, he would swap the wallet address in that traffic on the fly. You think you are sending money to your address, but it goes to the fraudster's address, quietly, without a hack, without your knowledge. Imagine the scale. Thousands of exit doors, and behind each one sits an invisible hand, picking the pockets of everyone who passes through. The person believed they were in the most protected network in the world, and they were being robbed at the exact point where they thought they were invulnerable. This, by the way, is an excellent illustration of our entire story in miniature. Control over the exit is power. Over your money, over your data, over your mask. And now imagine that instead of a greedy operator, someone stands at that door who doesn't need your pennies. Someone who needs something more expensive, your name. I looked at these numbers and thought about those who believe the opposite, and then I stumbled upon a story that stopped me. I'll call him Aslan. That's not his name. In the Darknet, people don't use real names, but the person was real. An activist from a country where you pay for inconvenient truths with your freedom and sometimes your life. He was passing documents to the outside about what his government was doing. He moved his channel to the Darknet and was absolutely sure that the onion armor would protect him, that he had dissolved among 8,000 servers. For the sake of that certainty, he risked everything, stayed in the country, continued to work, and didn't run when he could have. He didn't entrust the network with money, he entrusted it with his life. They found him. They didn't hack him brilliantly, they didn't guess his password. Someone was simply standing at the right doors and someone knew which building the right server was in. Those 2 things were enough. I won't talk about what happened to Aslan afterward. I will only say that his channel went silent and not a single document ever came out of there again. He believed in a territory of freedom, and the territory of freedom turned out to be a concrete building with a door that can be entered with a warrant or without one. And when both halves of the picture came together in my head, I went cold. On one side, a nameless actor with deep pockets, spending years placing hundreds of servers at the network's entry points to see who is entering. On the other side, physical hosting compressed into a few points, which can be taken down in a single night, and which someone is studying very carefully. And then the only truly terrifying question arose: what if the same observer is standing at both doors? Someone who has the resources for both hundreds of servers inside the network and access to the buildings outside. Who on the planet possesses such pockets, such patience, and such interest all at once? I knew the answer. I just really didn't want to say it. To strip your mask off in the most protected network in the world, you don't need to hack anything. You just need to stand at 2 doors simultaneously. I will repeat this one more time because that is the whole secret. You don't need a brilliant hack. You don't need a supercomputer. You don't need to break the encryption that holds the onion armor together. You don't even have to touch the encryption. It is enough to see what enters one door and what exits from another, and match one to the other by time and volume. The first door knows who enters. The third door knows where it goes. If the same observer sees both doors, all that's left is arithmetic. In 1 minute, a person with such and such an address entered the network. In that same minute, a signal of the same size exited the network to such and such a site. Coincidence after coincidence, and after some time, there is no doubt left. It is the same stream. The mask is removed. Let me break this down in simple terms because you need to feel the weight of it. Imagine a person in a mask entering a building through one door and exiting through another on the opposite side. You cannot see their face, but you have a camera at the entrance and a camera at the exit. And you notice something simple. Every time a person in a red scarf enters the first door, exactly 1 minute later, a person in a red scarf exits the second door. Once, twice, 3 times. You never took the mask off, but you don't need to. You already know it is the same person because everything else matches. The time, the rhythm, the details. That is exactly how traffic correlation works. The observer doesn't need to crack your packet. They only need to see your signal enter and see an identical signal exit a moment later. The encryption remains intact and unharmed. It simply ceases to matter. And here's another detail that sends a chill down your spine. Even your request, which site you want to connect to, travels via a standard, unprotected path at a certain point. Researchers found that a massive portion of these requests, upon exiting the network, are seen by just one major service through which they pass. That is to say, there's a point where they don't see who you are, but they see where you are going, for almost everyone at once. Another bottleneck, another door where it is convenient to stand. Now, add this to what we already know. A nameless actor spent years planting hundreds of servers at the entry and middle points of the network. According to that researcher's calculations, at a certain period, there was roughly a 16% probability that a user would enter the network through one of this actor's servers, up to 35% that they would pass through their server in the middle, 1 in 6 at the entrance, 1 in 3 in the middle. And all of this was maintained by someone whom no one could name. And who in this world actually needs to see who enters an anonymous network without needing to steal money? Who has the budget to pay for hundreds of servers for years without any profit? And who is so good at leaving no traces? I don't like big words, but the answer is obvious, and it is not about some hacker in a basement. Remember how I started. The Onion Network was not invented by teenagers or idealists. It was invented inside the American military machine. Initially, it was a project of the United States Naval Intelligence, a tool for their own people to communicate without revealing themselves. And here lies the most uncomfortable part. The network built for intelligence never left the hands of intelligence. Parts of those same structures have remained among those funding this network for years. Money from American government programs has been supporting this network for decades, officially through grants as aid for free speech and the fight against censorship. It sounds noble, and perhaps in part it is. But think about the design itself. The same circles built the tool, continued to fund it, and possess all the resources to stand at its doors. The builder, the sponsor, and the observer, all in one. And this is not a guess pulled from thin air. In 2013, a former contractor for the American National Security Agency leaked a mountain of secret documents, and among them was an internal presentation from the agency itself dedicated specifically to the Onion Network. Even then, more than 10 years ago, the intelligence agency was deeply involved in how to remove the masks in this network. And here's what was most telling in that presentation. The agency effectively admitted its own limits. The document clearly conveyed the idea that de-anonymizing every single user of the network at all times would not work. Read that phrasing carefully. This is not an admission of powerlessness. It is an admission of capability. Everyone, all the time, that is impossible, which means someone specific at the right moment that is possible. The intelligence agency was not complaining that the network is impenetrable. It was calmly stating that it penetrates it selectively for a specific target. A person doesn't sink themselves when they scream that they are all-powerful. They sink themselves when they casually clarify what they cannot yet do. That clarification reveals exactly what they are already capable of. And since then, it has only gotten worse for those who believe in the armor. Previously, traffic correlation was a slow and imprecise task, requiring luck and long-term observation. That was comforting. People thought, theoretically, it can be cracked, but in practice, it is too much trouble. No one will bother with an ordinary person. Well, that comfort is outdated. Machine learning has entered the stage. Systems have emerged that learn to correlate incoming and outgoing traffic automatically, on the fly, churning through thousands of connections at once. In laboratory conditions, such systems restore the source of an anonymous stream with an accuracy approaching 100%. On a real network, in live conditions with interference, the accuracy dropped but remained terrifyingly high, and it worked even when the data was incomplete or when someone tried to clutter it on purpose. Think about what this means. What used to require a person to watch 2 doors for weeks, a program now does in minutes. And the further we go, the cheaper and faster it gets. Fresh scientific papers from 2025 show the same thing. This attack is not weakening. It is getting stronger every year. Time is playing against anonymity, not for it. Each new year, the armor gets thinner, and the one standing at the doors sees a little more clearly. And now imagine that this technology is not owned by a laboratory or a student enthusiast, but by a structure with the budget of an entire country, with access to backbone communication channels, and with those very hundreds of servers at the entrances. Put 1 and 1 together, and the beautiful fairy tale about invisibility falls apart completely. I will name one more person. Let's call him Marcus, a journalist from a country where asking the government questions is not safe. He worked with sources inside the security services and communicated with them only via the Darknet because he was sure that this correspondence could not be cracked. He didn't trade, he didn't steal, he didn't do anything illegal. He was just doing his job and trusting the armor. One day, his source stopped responding, and a few weeks later, Marcus realized that they had identified not just the source, but him as well. Someone had been sitting at the right doors the entire time. He closed his investigation and fled the country. You could say he was lucky. Do you understand the horror of it? All these people believed they were hiding in a crowd of 8,000 servers. But someone had been holding a significant share of those very servers the whole time, at the entrance and in the middle, and by all accounts had access to what was happening at the exit. And this is not just about activists and journalists. Here's another example. Not a dissident, not a fighter, just an ordinary person who thought he found easy money. He ran his own small scheme on the Darknet, thought he was smarter than the system, and was firmly convinced that they wouldn't get him because he was on tour. He was invisible. He didn't even hide properly. Why would he, when the armor would take everything? They caught him not because of a brilliant hack or a tip-off. Simply, at the right moment, his traffic passed through the right doors, and the invisible man ceased to be invisible. Everything he had made over the years turned into a single folder of evidence. He built his entire calculation on one word, anonymous, and that word turned out to be a lie. That, to be honest, is the whole pragmatism of it. People go to the Darknet not because they believe in high ideals of privacy. They go there because they were told they wouldn't get caught. And overconfidence always whispers the same thing. Others will be caught, but not me. I am craftier. Well, the statistics are made up of exactly those who think that way. One last figure remained, the one for which I started this entire investigation. A figure I found at the very beginning and reread 3 times. Now it will finally be heard, and after this, there will be nothing left to argue about. May 2020, 1. One single actor controlled at that moment about 23% of all Tor network exit doors. Almost every fourth door through which the Darknet releases traffic into the regular internet was in one set of hands. Stop for a second and think about this number. 23% of exits. Not 2 servers, not a dozen enthusiasts. Almost a quarter of the entire bottleneck through which the planet's anonymous traffic exits was controlled by one actor simultaneously. For the first time in the history of the network, so many doors ended up in one hand. And researchers explicitly warned that this is unprecedented. There it is. Now, let's put it all in one line. At the entrance to the network sat a nameless actor, through whose servers every 6th user passed. And at the exit, at one point, almost every 4th door ended up under one control. The entrance under surveillance. The exit under surveillance. And both doors are seen by someone who has enough resources to hold them for years, without earning a single penny from it. The onion armor rests on one single condition, that the entrance and the exit will never end up in the same hands. And I just showed you the years in which they were in those hands. One figure, 23%, and there's no need to explain anything else. Anonymity on the Darknet is not a wall. It is a curtain. It hides you from your neighbor, from your provider, from a casual, curious person, but not from the one who stands at both doors at once. For them, there's no curtain. So who owns the Darknet? After all these weeks, I have an answer, and it is simultaneously yes and no. And that is exactly why it is so terrifying. Formally, no one owns it. There's no company, no name in a registry, no person to whom the Onion Network belongs. Any volunteer on the planet can set up their server and become part of its doors. In that sense, the Darknet is truly no one's, but precisely because it is no one's, it has no defender. And into this void, those who possess 3 things at once have quietly converged. A deep pocket to pay for hundreds of servers for years, the patience to do it unnoticed, and the interest in seeing who is hiding. A small handful of the world's powerful, who have enough resources to stand at both the entrance and the exit. States, intelligence agencies, the same circles that once built this network. There is no owner, but a very specific force has its hand on the pulse. And that, if you think about it, is scarier than any master. A master at least has a name and an address. You can hold them accountable. But this force has nothing to be held accountable to. It formally does not exist. It just stands at the doors. This is the real scale. The network, which is presented as the last bastion of privacy in a world of total surveillance, is by its very design transparent precisely to those from whom people are hiding in it. This is a global risk, and it concerns not just traders from dark marketplaces. It concerns every journalist, every activist, every person who one day decides that they have something to hide from their own government. People don't operate on the dark web because it's invulnerable. They operate there because it's convenient, cheap, and creates the sensation of invisibility. A sensation. For years, people built schemes there, hid money, and conducted business, genuinely believing they had dissolved without a trace. But in reality, they were working all that time in a network with someone standing at the door who was far more powerful than they were. And all their cunning lasted only until the day that someone decided to take a closer look. Greed and overconfidence always assume they won't be tracked. They are the first to be caught. I began this investigation convinced that the dark web has no master, and that is its strength. I am finishing it with the understanding that the dark web has no master, and that is its greatest trap. You entered the network to become invisible, and in that same second, you become visible to the only one who truly knows how to watch. 8,000 servers, 3 doors, and someone you will never see is calmly standing right at 2 of them. Anonymity on the dark web is not freedom. It is the most expensive illusion in the world, and as a rule, it is paid for by those who believed in it the most. My name is Mr. Dark Web. Stay safe, and remember, in a network without a master, The one who stays the quietest becomes the master. Somewhere in Russia sits a man who refused to unlock a wallet containing hundreds of millions of dollars. He was offered a deal. He remained silent. The man who owns that money received a life sentence, the first such verdict in the country's history. And the platform that earned that money processed 80% of all Darknet cryptocurrency transactions in the world. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today I will tell you how two dying forums from the Russian Darknet built a corporation that turned out to be larger than any Western drug cartel. At this company, the status of a trusted supplier was granted only after 1,000 successful sales, with a dispute rate below 7%. Exclusive contracts with sellers, you work only for us or you don't work at all. An escrow system, an arbitration court, ratings with reviews, and even free medical consultations for clients. It sounds like a description of a tech corporation from Silicon Valley, but the products sold on this platform killed. I spent several months on this story. I dug through forums, read leaked correspondence, and spoke with people who once worked inside the system, and with those whom this system ground up. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This is not a story about drugs, and it is not a story about hackers. This is a story about business architecture built in an environment where there are no laws, no contracts, and no courts. An environment where every dispute is settled either by money or by violence. And someone managed to build a corporation in this environment with a turnover in the billions. A corporation that interested the intelligence services of Germany, the United States, and Russia itself simultaneously, and whose liquidation took years of joint effort. This is the story of Hydra, a platform that, over 7 years, funneled $5.2 billion in cryptocurrency through itself. A platform with 17 million registered accounts and 19,000 sellers. A platform that invented a delivery method that later spread from South Korea to Sri Lanka, and still works today, even after Hydra itself has vanished. And this story does not begin with drugs. It begins with a war. In 2012, RAMP, Russian anonymous marketplace, appeared on the Russian language Darknet, the first truly large platform to bring sellers and buyers together on one site. RAMP served Moscow and St. Petersburg, and within 3 years scorched everything around it. Those who tried to compete received DDoS attacks that took their servers down for weeks. Administrators of smaller platforms would wake up in the morning to find their real names leaked to the police. RAMP didn't just dominate, it destroyed. In 2014, RAMP sparked a revolution. It introduced an auto shop system. The buyer would select from a catalog of pre-placed stashes, pay, and immediately receive the coordinates. No negotiations, no waiting. The user base skyrocketed. By the middle of 2015, only 2 notable players remained on the market besides RAMP. The legal RC forum, Synthetics, Spice, a smaller audience, and the Way Away forum, roughly the same profile, roughly the same scale. Both understood. Alone, they were the next to be destroyed. Individually, neither had the resources to defend against DDoS attacks, nor the user base to compete. And then they made a decision that changed the Russian language Darknet forever. They united under a new name, Hydra, the mythological serpent with many heads. Cut off one and 2 more grow. In those early days, it sounded more like motivation for their own than a business strategy. An act of self-defense by 2 weak entities against 1 strong one. No one, not on the forums, not in analytical reports, suspected that this very merger would give birth to the largest illegal marketplace in internet history. The new platform's first strategic move was counterintuitive. While RAMP controlled the capitals, Moscow, St. Petersburg, and major cities, Hydra went into small towns and villages, places where there were fewer clients and less money, but zero competition. It was a bet on geography, not on assortment, and it worked. Town after town, village after village, Hydra claimed territory that Ramp considered useless, but the main invention lay not in strategy, but in logistics. On Western Darknet platforms, Silk Road Alpha Bay, goods were sent by regular mail. In the United States, this worked. The United States Postal Service processed hundreds of millions of packages a year, and control was minimal. In Russia, the mail was unreliable, slow, and monitored. Sending a package through the Russian post in those years was practically the same as surrendering voluntarily. Hydra solved this problem radically: the stash system. A courier would hide the product in a vacuum-sealed bag in a cache, under a park bench, in a crack in a brick wall, in a hollow tree, behind a pipe in an apartment building entrance. The buyer would pay for the order with Bitcoin, receive photos of the cache and a description of the route, then go and retrieve it. The buyer, the seller, and the courier never met. Not a single physical contact. Not a single package at the post office. Not a single intersection. In essence, Hydra turned the purchase into a quest. A person received a set of landmarks, photos, a description of the location, sometimes detailed instructions on how to get there and exactly where to look. One journalist would later write that it was like Pokemon Go for drugs. A crude comparison, but an accurate one. It was elegant, fast, scalable, and absolutely ruthless to those at the very bottom of the chain. The couriers who hid the stashes were called stash men. The system itself created training materials for them. A so-called Stashman's Bible circulated online, an ebook with detailed instructions, how to choose locations, how to camouflage caches, how to behave if detained. One of the first stashmen I encountered in the materials worked under the pseudonym Arrow, a student from a town with a population of less than 100,000, 20 years old. He was promised 30,000 rubles a day, more than his mother earned in a month. He lasted 6 weeks. They tracked him down through the patterns of his small stashes, the same districts, the same times, data from cell towers. The trial was fast. 8 years in a maximum security prison under Article 228-1. His employer was never found, and they didn't look. Why bother? 2 days later, the next person took Arrow's place. The average career of a stash man is 2 months. Not years, months. After that, 4 to 20 years in a penal colony, depending on the volume seized. How were they caught? By analyzing the patterns of small stashes, they would find the stash man. Through him, they would reach the point where he received his wholesale batch. And through the wholesale point, the supplier. The supplier didn't want to lose territory and didn't want to go to prison himself. So he would hire a new person and ruthlessly turn the old one in. A conveyor belt. Russian prisons were filling up with students and school children who thought they had found a side hustle. In just 10 months of 1 year, more than 165,000 people were detained across the country for drug-related offenses. A significant portion of them were stash men. And meanwhile, Hydra was growing. In its first year of operation, the platform earned $9.4 million. For the Darknet in 2015, that's a serious figure. But that was only the beginning, because in 2016, an event occurred for which Hydra was prepared, while everyone else was not. The year 2016. Several major operations by the Federal Security Service and the Ministry of Internal Affairs descended one after another on corrupt customs officers who had provided channels for drug imports into Russia for years. The arrests happened in a chain. One detainee led to the next. Cocaine, heroin, MDMA, everything imported from abroad suddenly became scarce. Traditional suppliers disappeared or went underground. The market turned toward domestic production. Underground methadone labs and cannabis greenhouses began appearing all over the country. And this is where Hydra's second strategic bet paid off. By this point, the platform already controlled the supply of chemical precursors from China, not the substances themselves, but the raw materials from which they were synthesized on site. When the entire market turned to local production, Hydra turned out to be the one holding the key component of the conveyor belt. The right place, the right time, the perfect position. Mephedrone, a synthetic stimulant known in Russia as salt, became the primary product. One of the online shop owners on the platform later wrote on the forum that mephedrone was a new religion for the young Russians, and this popularity was not accidental. It was engineered. For the platform and the shops that traded on it, mephedrone was the ideal product. Cheap production from accessible Chinese precursors, a fast cycle, high addictiveness, and therefore guaranteed repeat demand. Hydra didn't just sell, it built an entire ecosystem around this demand. The platform provided consulting services for aspiring producers, help with purchasing precursors and equipment, recommendations on the process. Hydra transformed into a supplier of raw materials, a logistics company, a marketplace, and a support service all at once, a full cycle. And now, about how this ecosystem maintained trust in an environment where trust does not exist. The escrow system worked simply. The buyer's money was held by the platform until receipt of the goods was confirmed. If you didn't find the stash, you opened a dispute and a moderator would review it. The arbitration court would issue rulings, and the parties were obligated to comply. Sellers received ratings with reviews. Just like on any legal marketplace, the trusted seller status was granted only after 1,000 successful transactions with a dispute rate below 7%, stricter than the performance metrics in most real-world companies. Contracts were exclusive. The seller worked only for Hydra. An attempt to move to a competing platform was punished by account suspension and the loss of all funds held in escrow. Attempting to contact a buyer outside the platform meant a fine of up to 2 bitcoins. Hydra did not tolerate leaks. Every transaction, every message, every dispute, everything had to go through them. It would seem a drug platform. Anonymity, crime, no guarantees. What else could they possibly come up with? Hydra came up with it. The platform launched free telemedicine consultations for its users. They hired real medical professionals. Consultations were conducted via a Telegram chatbot, through the messenger on their website, and on the forum. A drug marketplace that cared about the health of its clients. If that isn't the most cynical parody of corporate responsibility in the history of business, legal or illegal, then I don't know what is. But behind the cynicism lay cold logic. A dead client doesn't buy. A client who received help and returned buys again. Caring for the health of consumers wasn't charity. It was a retention strategy. Every decision at Hydra, from the medical chatbot to fines for contact outside the platform, was dictated by one thing: profit maximization. Nothing else. A rigid hierarchy was built inside the platform. At the top, administrators who managed the entire architecture. Below them, regional operators, each responsible for their own territory. Further down, shop owners who hired their own cladmen, dead drop couriers, and paid the platform a commission for every transaction. Hydra charged sellers a monthly subscription fee and a percentage of every sale. Essentially, a franchise, only an illegal one. By 2017, Hydra covered at least 69% of the Russian population, 1,129 settlements across the country. From Kaliningrad to Vladivostok, there wasn't a region where the couriers hadn't reached. Geographic coverage was the key advantage, and it explains why no Western platform could replicate Hydra's model. Western marketplaces depended on postal infrastructure, and the mail is limited by speed, control, and coverage zones. Hydra depended on people, young guys with legs and a smartphone. There were enough people in Russia, especially those who needed quick money and had no other options. The system was scalable to the point of absurdity. Need a new city? Just find a new courier. Job postings on forums sounded like vacancies on a career site. On one of the forums, I found a typical one. Greetings. Looking for sound guys from the region? There's work, nothing complicated. The pay will surprise you. Write to private messages. Not a word about the fact that the job ends in a penal colony in 2 months on average. Hydra didn't invent the Darknet. It invented a way to turn poverty into logistics. And it was this method, not encryption technology, not an anonymous network, not cryptocurrency, that became what made the Russian language platform the largest in the world. A system where people were the cheapest and most replaceable consumable material. But Hydra wasn't going to wait for the market to fall into its hands on its own. In 2017, it went on the offensive. It launched a massive DDoS campaign against Ramp. Strikes against the competitors' servers came in waves, week after week. In parallel, an advertising expansion, videos on YouTube, channels on Telegram, a presence on WeChat. A Darknet marketplace was advertising itself on the open internet. It was bold, it was unprecedented, and it worked. In July of 2017, the Russian police shut down Ramp. Coincidence? Perhaps. But the result was unambiguous. Thousands of sellers and hundreds of thousands of buyers were left without a platform, and they all flooded into one single place, a mass migration. A market that had been divided among several players was concentrated in one pair of hands in a matter of weeks. Hydra didn't just win the war, it was the only one left on the battlefield, and what it started building after that looked less like a marketplace and more like a state with its own currency, its own police, and its own violence. After the fall of Ramp, a flood hit Hydra. Thousands of sellers who had lost their platform overnight were looking for a new home. Hundreds of thousands of buyers, accustomed to the service and instant dead drops, followed. According to data that would later surface in analytical reports, by the end of 2017, Hydra controlled the Russian language Darknet market almost entirely. Not 90%, not 95%, entirely. Competitors capable of handling such volume simply did not exist. This was a moment that, in legal business, is called market capture. When the last competitor falls, not because you're better, but because you are the only one left, you gain the ability to dictate terms. And Hydra took advantage of this with surgical precision. The first thing the platform did was tighten the screws. Sellers migrating from Ramp discovered that the rules here were different. Exclusivity. You list your product on Hydra. Nowhere else. Any attempt to trade in parallel on another platform was punished by immediate blocking and the loss of all funds in escrow accounts. Hydra didn't share the market. It consumed it. The second was the expansion of services. In addition to trading substances, Hydra launched full-fledged financial services. A built-in crypto mixer called Bitcoin Bank Mixer allowed Bitcoins to be passed through a chain of intermediate wallets, blurring the trail of transactions until they were completely untraceable. For users, this meant anonymity. For Hydra, a new source of income, a commission on every money laundering operation. And this is where the scale of the story goes far beyond drug trafficking. It wasn't just small-time dealers pumping funds through Hydra's mixer. According to analysts, the platform's services were used by ransomware operators, DarkSide, the very ones that paralyzed Colonial Pipeline in the United States and left half of the East Coast without fuel. Conti, Ryuk, funds related to the Bitfinex crypto exchange hack, a theft of $4.5 billion, passed through Hydra. The laundering function was so in demand that some users created shell shops on Hydra, without a single real product, just to run money through the system. Fake sales, real laundering. The United States Treasury would later impose sanctions on Hydra and link it to the Moscow crypto exchange Garantex, through which more than $60 million from Darknet markets and more than $10 million from ransomware programs had passed. Hydra ceased to be just a marketplace. It became a financial infrastructure for cybercrime on a global scale. The platform's revenue grew exponentially, $9.4 million in the first year. By 2020, $1,300 million. Growth, 624% in 3 years. By 2021, 1,700,000,000. Numbers that would take the breath away from any financial analyst, no matter if it's a legal business or not. And that's when I hit a wall. I spent weeks digging, trying to understand one thing. Who is behind all this? Not who administers the servers. That was more or less clear. But who makes the strategic decisions? Who is the architect? Who is the person who turned 2 dying forums into a machine with a turnover in the billions? The first lead pointed to Dmitry Pavlov, a 30-year-old owner of the company Prom Service, which was also known under the names Hosting Company Full Drive and 4x4 Host-RU. Pavlov provided abuse-resistant hosting, servers that do not respond to complaints and requests from law enforcement. Dozens of servers that formed the backbone of Hydra were maintained by his company since November of 2015, that is, from the very launch. Money from Hydra's wallets regularly arrived in his accounts. For the American Department of Justice, Pavlov was the operator, a key link, the person without whom the platform could not physically exist. But in forums and leaks, the picture was different. Pavlov is a technical figure, an infrastructure guy, a person who kept the servers running, but did not make strategic decisions. Hydra operators, whom intermediaries managed to contact, mentioned other names, or rather, other pseudonyms. Someone mentioned a person who called himself God, or Boss, a person who changed platforms one after another, each time opening shops on a new platform after the previous one closed, a person who communicated only through Vipol and Telegram and managed divisions in dozens of regions. The data contradicted each other. One source claimed that the entire structure is managed by a team of 11 people. Another, that the real founder retired long ago and lives outside of Russia. A third, that the founder is sitting near Moscow and personally controls every major shop. I had almost decided that it was impossible to identify the real figure when, through one of the leaked materials that surfaced much later, I found a name, Stanislav Moiseev, a resident of Khimki, a satellite city of Moscow, not a programmer, not a hacker, an organizer of a criminal community who built a network with divisions in nearly 60 regions of Russia and in Belarus. He hired people through messengers, put candidates through his own security service, and signed employment contracts with employees, with bonuses for meeting quotas and fines for disciplinary violations. Employment contracts in a drug cartel. For conspiracy, he used the pseudonyms of famous crime bosses, and also called himself God and Boss. When one platform was closed, he immediately moved to another, reopened shops, and at the same time created an illusion of choice for buyers, masking his shops as independent retail outlets. Pavlov held the servers. Moiseev held everything else. 2 people, 2 sides of the same machine. One provided the technical infrastructure, the other, the human one. And the machine worked. But those who sit at the top of a system generating billions, sooner or later develop an appetite that cannot be satisfied within a single market. Hydra controlled Russia. That became not enough. And the next step they took was so bold that even the Darknet didn't believe it. On December 16th, 2019, a document appeared on Hydra, accessible only through the Tor browser, an investment memorandum, glossy, detailed, with financial forecasts and a product description. Hydra announced an ICO, an initial coin offering, and planned to raise $146 million, 1,470,000 tokens at $100 apiece, 49% of the new project. Buyers of 100 or more tokens received a promise of monthly dividends in bitcoins, $500 a month. This meant that Hydra's operators were counting on a monthly revenue for the new project of over $15 million. They weren't being modest, and they weren't hiding. The project was called Eternos. It was supposed to be a global next-generation platform, a darknet marketplace for the Western market, plus an encrypted messenger, plus its own anonymous browser like Tor, plus a crypto exchange without verification, plus an artificial intelligence-based arbitration system, all in one package, all anonymous. The creators promised that Eternos would be available in English and other languages, meaning this wasn't about improving Hydra, but about creating its global clone from scratch. At the time of the initial coin offering announcement, Hydra claimed 3 million users and 100,000 daily transactions. An investigation by the publication Prukt confirmed 2.5 million registered accounts, of which nearly 400,000 had made at least one purchase. The numbers were real. The ambitions were cosmic. The memorandum contained a phrase that speaks to the scale of their ambition better than any retelling. The Hydra administrators wrote verbatim, "This will start a new era in the West. The scale of the expansion is hard to imagine." The people running the drug platform from Kimki were planning to enter the global market with an investment proposal, and they believed they would succeed. The Russian language crypto publication Forklog reacted first. The warning was direct. Without any external oversight, this could turn out to be an exit scam, a scheme where the organizers collect money and vanish. On carding forums, moderators began closing threads about Eternos. The community distanced itself. Too bold, too loud, too much like a trap. The initial coin offering, by all appearances, failed. Eternos was never launched. December 2019. Then a postponement to September 2020, and then silence. But the very fact that the operators of an illegal platform released an investment memorandum with financial forecasts and a promise of dividends shows a level of confidence that no darknet market had reached before or since. It sounds almost comical. A drug cartel with an investment round. Almost. And now, about the price paid for all of this by the people at the very bottom of the system. Dead drop couriers were expendable. That is not a metaphor. That is a literal description of the business model. The entire logistics of Hydra were built on the assumption that a courier is a temporary unit. They work until they get caught. Then they are replaced. The cost of replacement is zero. New couriers came on their own, lured by ads promising easy money. A guy under the pseudonym Mole. He wasn't even 20. He lived with his mother in a concrete apartment block on the outskirts of a regional center. Recruitment happened through a Telegram channel in literally a few messages. They explained to him that the risk was minimal and the pay was higher than anyone he knew his age. They made him read the Courier's Bible, that very electronic book with tips on how to hide drops and how to behave if detained. He worked for 3 weeks. He was caught on a security camera in a residential courtyard, digging at the base of a pipe at 3 in the morning. 14 years in a penal colony for a particularly large amount. His mother only found out what he had been doing at the trial, but prison wasn't the only threat. Inside the system, there was its own punitive structure. Scavengers was the name for people who searched for and stole other people's drops, finding the stashes before the buyer and taking the goods. Sometimes this was done by random people, sometimes by the couriers themselves, who decided to make a little extra on the side. To fight the scavengers and to punish couriers who messed up, the shops hired enforcers. Enforcers are fighters, hired ones. Their job is to find the delinquent courier or the caught scavenger and punish them physically. These weren't random brawls. This was a system. Shops on Hydra openly posted job openings for enforcers, specifying the region and the pay. The rate for a visit to the offender was about 18,000 rubles. The beatings were filmed on camera and uploaded to Telegram channels as a warning to the others. In some channels, I found over 2,000 such videos. The victims were forced to apologize on camera. Broken fingers were standard. In extreme cases, sexual violence. At least one case ended in murder. Think about it. A darknet platform that started as a digital market where people never meet face-to-face spawned its own system of physical violence. With job openings, price lists, and video reports, couriers who couldn't pay a security deposit when starting the job were required to provide a copy of their passport. This meant that in the event of a failure or suspicion of theft, the enforcer knew exactly where to find them. The system ran on fear just as effectively as it did on greed. Those who sat at the top didn't touch the product. They didn't go outside. They risked nothing but their digital anonymity, and below, a conveyor belt of young bodies, ground up with the regularity of a factory cycle. Some of the imprisoned couriers were later sent to the front in Ukraine, straight from the colony into the trenches. The system recycled them until the very end. By 2021, Hydra was processing 80% of all cryptocurrency transactions related to darknet markets in the world. Not in Russia, in the world. Over its entire period of operation, about $5.2 billion in cryptocurrency, 17 million buyer accounts, 19,000 sellers, 1,129 populated areas. A Russian language platform that wasn't planned as a global project became the largest illegal marketplace in internet history. Bigger than Silk Road, bigger than Alphabet, bigger than all Western platforms combined. But the servers that held all of this together weren't in Russia. They were in Germany, with an abuse-resistant hosting provider that believed its clients were just renters of server space. German police got a tip, and they started digging. On April 5th, 2022, early in the morning Central European Time, officers from the German Federal Criminal Police Office, the BKA, carried out an operation they had been preparing for months. The target, server infrastructure located on German territory at an abuse-resistant hosting provider, the very one that didn't respond to complaints and requests. The operation was coordinated with American intelligence agencies, the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Internal Revenue Service, and the United States Postal Inspection Service, an international coalition against one platform. The scale of the preparation spoke to the scale of the target. It all started with a tip. Someone, the source has still not been revealed, informed German law enforcement that the infrastructure of the largest darknet market in the world was hosted on German territory, not in Russia, not in some offshore jurisdiction, in Germany. The country, famous for its pedantic attitude toward the law, turned out to be the physical home for a platform through which billions of dollars of drug money had passed. The BKA started digging. They identified the provider, tracked the servers, documented the data flows, and on the appointed day, they seized everything. Hydra's servers were shut down. Cryptocurrency wallets linked to the platform were confiscated. They held $25 million in Bitcoin, 543 Bitcoin, frozen, blocked, and removed from circulation. That same day, on Hydra's main page in Tor, a placeholder appeared with the logos of the BKA and American agencies. 7 years of operation, $5.2 billion, 17 million accounts, and one page with the words, "This platform has been seized." In parallel, the United States Department of Justice announced charges against Dmitry Olegovich Pavlov, a 30-year-old Russian resident who managed the company Prom Service. 2 counts of indictment: conspiracy to distribute narcotics and conspiracy to launder money. The prosecutors leading the case were the same ones who had previously successfully secured a conviction for Elizabeth Holmes, the founder of Theranos. The level of the legal team spoke to the seriousness of the intentions. The United States Treasury Department imposed sanctions on Hydra and the Moscow Crypto Exchange Garantex on that same day. More than 100 cryptocurrency addresses linked to Hydra's operations were added to the sanctions list. Bitcoin, Tether, Ethereum, everything that passed through those addresses was blocked for any citizen or company falling under United States jurisdiction. Pavlov reacted calmly. In an interview with the BBC, he stated that he learned about the charges from the media. His position was simple. The company Prom Service only rented out servers as an intermediary. He didn't know what was hosted on them. He didn't control the content. He provided a technical service and nothing more. 10 days after the servers were seized, Pavlov was arrested by Russian authorities. And then, something happened that turned a technical figure into a key defendant. According to the Telegram channel MASH, Pavlov refused to grant the investigation access to the seized Bitcoin wallet. On this wallet, according to the investigation, were stored not the 25 million that the German police confiscated, but significantly more. Hundreds of millions of dollars. Pavlov remained silent. A man who claimed he was just renting out servers somehow had access to a wallet with hundreds of millions, and for some reason refused to open it. One detail, and there's no need to explain anything else. But Pavlov was only half of the equation. On December 2nd, 2024, the Moscow Regional Court handed down a sentence that had no precedent in the history of the Russian justice system. Stanislav Moiseev, the very same man from Khimki, the god, the boss, the organizer of the criminal community, was sentenced to life imprisonment. For the first time in Russia, a life sentence was handed down for a crime of this type. The newspaper Kommersant confirmed a precedent. The jury found Moiseev and 15 of his accomplices guilty of organizing a criminal community and the illegal production and sale of narcotics. 15 accomplices received sentences ranging from 8 to 23 years in maximum security penal colonies. Moiseev was also fined 4 million rubles. The combined fine for his accomplices was 16 million. During the investigation, Russian and Belarusian law enforcement seized nearly a ton of drugs and psychotropic substances. The transport, land plots, and real estate of the convicted were turned over as state revenue. A notable detail, the prosecutor's office did not officially link the verdict to Hydra. The charges were formulated as organizing a criminal community and drug trafficking between 2015 and October of 2018. But state news agencies TASS and Interfax, citing anonymous sources in law enforcement, explicitly named Moiseev as the founder of Hydra, officially a criminal community. Unofficially, everyone knew what was being discussed. Moiseev got life. Pavlov is sitting in silence. The wallet with hundreds of millions remains unopened. Two men who held the engine of the largest illegal platform in history. One is in a cell forever. The other has the key he refuses to turn. Curtain. But the story doesn't end there, because Hydra was named Hydra for a reason. 3 months after the servers were seized, the Way Away forum, the very one where Hydra once began, returned from hibernation. Alongside it appeared the Kraken platform, positioning itself as the direct heir to Hydra, pro-Russian, with the same principles. On the other side, the Rutor forum, which merged with the OMG marketplace, pro-Ukrainian, or at the very least, that's how it was perceived on the forums. The war for Hydra's inheritance mirrored the real war. Kraken versus OMG, Russia versus Ukraine. Even in the Darknet, geopolitics proved stronger than money. But the result of this war is not the victory of one side. The result is fragmentation. Instead of one monopolist, dozens of smaller platforms appeared. Mega, Blacksprout, Solaris, and dozens of Telegram shops. The market didn't disappear, it shattered into pieces. According to analysts at TRM Labs, in 2023, Russian-language Darknet platforms controlled 93% of the global market. Total revenue, approximately $1.5 billion. Hydra is dead, but the model it created is alive. The dead drop system, the very method of delivery invented on Russian language forums in the mid-2010s, has spread across the world. South Korea, the president declared total war after a 14-year-old schoolgirl bought methamphetamine via a mobile phone and was found unconscious in a school restroom. Hungary, Czech Republic, Greece, dead drop points are appearing in European cities. Sri Lanka, Indonesia, Thailand, Russian-speaking expats who left after the start of the war are opening dead drop networks for tourists. The model works everywhere. There are poor people willing to risk it for quick cash, and those people are everywhere. I spent months on this investigation, and here's what I took away from it. Hydra was not an anomaly. It was a prototype, a proof of concept. It showed that in the 21st century, you can build a criminal empire with billion-dollar turnovers without an office, without weapons, and without an army. Only a platform, an algorithm, and an endless stream of people willing to work for 30,000 rubles a day. Moiseev got life. Pavlov is silent. 15 accomplices are sitting in maximum security prisons. Almost a ton of drugs seized. 25 million in Bitcoin confiscated. And the wallet with hundreds of millions still unopened. And somewhere right now, a guy in his 20s who just read an ad in Telegram promising easy money is leaving his house to hide his first stash. He doesn't know that the average career span of a dead dropper is 2 months. He thinks he will be the exception. He won't be. As always, yours, Mr. Dark Web. Stay safe. In a country where 25 million people have never seen the internet, 8,000 hackers are at work. They don't know what YouTube is. They have never opened Google. But over the last 10 years, they have stolen more than $7 billion. That is more than the GDP of some countries. And every stolen cent has been turned into a nuclear warhead. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today I will tell you about Lazarus, a hacker army that might be inside your wallet right now. This story began for me by accident. At the end of 2024, I was working on a completely different piece, digging through leaks from a major Darknet forum. I was looking for information on financial schemes in Southeast Asia. Nothing unusual, routine data collection. But among dozens of files, I came across one I initially ignored. A small text document written in broken English. No title, no signature. Inside, a set of wallets, dates, transfer amounts, and a note at the very end that translates roughly to, "Never touch these addresses. These are not people. This is a state." At the time, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought it was someone's paranoid note, maybe a joke. I saved the file and forgot about it. But 2 months later, in February of 2025, something happened that made that line stop feeling like a joke. $1.5 billion vanished from the world's largest crypto exchange in a single night. No password hacks, no phishing, not a single mistake on the victim's part. And when the FBI named the culprit Lazarus Group, I went back to that document. I opened it and compared the addresses to those published by the Bureau. 4 out of 51 matched. From that moment, I started digging, and the deeper I went, the scarier the picture became. Lazarus is not a hacker group in the traditional sense. It is not a group of enthusiasts in hoodies sitting in a basement. It is not anonymous chat users looking to make some extra cash. It is the cyber military of an entire state, North Korea, the most closed-off country on the planet, a country that officially denies their existence, yet builds its entire missile program on their work. The United States Department of Justice calls Lazarus an instrument for undermining global cybersecurity and generating illegal revenue in violation of international sanctions. Behind this dry phrasing lies a reality that is deeply unsettling. Lazarus is behind the attack on Sony Pictures in 2014, the robbery of the Central Bank of Bangladesh in 2016, and the WannaCry virus that paralyzed hospitals in 150 countries in 2017, and dozens of crypto thefts, the total sum of which exceeds $7 billion. I spent several months on this investigation. I combed through hundreds of documents, Department of Justice indictments, FBI reports, analytics from blockchain companies like Chainalysis and TRM Labs, testimonies from North Korean defectors, and materials from a United Nations panel of experts. Separately, I looked into private threads on Darknet forums that aren't easy to reach. And the more I read, the more clearly I understood. What Lazarus does has no equal. There has never been anything like it in history. No country in the world has ever built its economy on hacker attacks. But North Korea did. This is a story about state-sponsored terrorism disguised as cybercrime, about a country that turned its best mathematicians into thieves, about people who are selected in school, trained like special forces sent abroad, and who steal billions without the right to keep a single cent for themselves. And I won't start at the beginning. I will start at the end, with the largest heist in the history of cryptocurrencies, because it is exactly what shows what this machine has turned into, and why no one can stop it. February 21st, 2025, Friday, Dubai, the office of Bybit, one of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchanges, a normal workday, a routine operation, transferring funds from a cold wallet to a hot one, a procedure employees had performed dozens of times, 3 signatures from several confirmations, everything by the book. On the screen, the standard interface of Safe Wallet, a multi-signature platform used by thousands of companies worldwide. The amount, the recipient address, the confirm button. CEO Benjo looked at the screen. Everything looked perfect. He clicked confirm. 2 other employees did the same. 40 minutes later, 401,347 units of Ethereum, $1.5 billion, vanished. Not to the right address, not to the right wallet, not to the right country. No one made a mistake. That is what's important to understand. The system did not fail. Passwords were not stolen. Employees did not click a phishing link. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. And that is exactly what those on the other side of the screen were counting on. What actually happened? A few days before the attack, hackers compromised the computer of one of the Safe Wallet developers. Not Bybit, but the platform itself, through which the confirmation passed. They didn't break the security head on. They didn't guess passwords or look for vulnerabilities in the code. They got in through a person, social engineering, a call, an email, perhaps an invitation to a conference or a fake job interview. The exact method is still classified, but according to the Safe Ecosystem Foundation, the compromise occurred via a developer's workstation. Having gained access to his machine, the hackers stole session tokens, temporary keys that allow access to the company's cloud service without re-entering a password. That is how they bypassed 2-factor authentication. They calculated the timing, working the same hours as the developer to avoid raising suspicion from monitoring systems. And then, on February 19th, 2 days before the attack, they swapped one single file, a fragment of JavaScript code responsible for displaying transactions. This file reached the server through the official Safe Wallet domain. It worked perfectly for everyone except Bybit. You might think $1.5 billion, and no one noticed during the transfer. It sounds like a bad script, but that is exactly how it works. When you're used to clicking confirm every day and everything always goes smoothly, you don't double check every pixel on the screen. This isn't negligence, it's trust in a system used by thousands of companies. And Lazarus didn't hack the system, they hacked that trust. The swapped code showed Bybit employees one thing, while sending something else entirely. Their signatures on hardware wallets turned into what security experts later called a blind signature. They were confirming a transaction they couldn't see. 10 hours after the hack, 350,000 Bybit users submitted withdrawal requests. Panic. The exchange began to wobble. The price of Ethereum dropped. The market froze. And the stolen money was already moving. A conveyor belt honed over years. In the first 48 hours, more than $160 million were funneled through dozens of intermediate wallets, converted into other cryptocurrencies, and run through decentralized exchanges and cross-chain bridges. Every step automated, every wallet disposable. By February 23rd, more than 200 million had already been scattered. By February 26th, 5 days later, 400 million had gone into the shadows. And by March 20th, according to Benjo himself, 86% of the stolen funds had been converted into Bitcoin and scattered across thousands of addresses. The money dissolved faster than law enforcement could react. On February 26th, the FBI issued a public statement. The culprit was identified, Lazarus Group, also known as Trader, also known as APT-38, North Korea. The Bureau published 51 Ethereum addresses linked to the laundering, and they appealed to all crypto platforms in the world to block the transactions. But by that moment, hundreds of millions were already out of reach. I spent several weeks tracking the aftermath of this blow, not through headlines, but through people, on forums, in chats, in private groups, and among dozens of stories, two stuck with me. A user with the handle SunTrader wrote that he kept everything he had earned from 4 years of remote work on Bybit, about $180,000. When the panic started, he tried to withdraw his funds. The system worked, but the price of Ethereum had already dropped. He lost, by his calculations, $40,000 in a few hours. Not because he was robbed directly, but because the market collapsed under the weight of fear. He wrote, "I don't even know who to blame. The exchange doesn't seem to be at fault. I don't seem to be at fault, but the money is gone." The second case is harder. A woman from Southeast Asia, using the pseudonym May Wallet, said she had invested money into crypto through Bybit that her family had been saving for her father's surgery, about $22,000. She's not a trader. Someone told her that you could quickly increase your money on the exchange. When the exchange wobbled, she panicked and withdrew everything, but at the crashed rate, less than half remained. $1.5 billion is not an abstract figure. It is thousands of stories like these, multiplied by fear, by ignorance, and by trust in a system that turned out to be fragile. But here's what distinguishes this hack from any other in history. The money didn't go to a yacht, it didn't go to a villa, it didn't go to the account of some lone genius. It went to a country where the average salary is less than $100 a month, but which tests ballistic missiles every year. According to estimates by the UN panel of experts disbanded in 2024, up to 40% of the funding for North Korea's nuclear and missile programs comes from cyber thefts. 40%. Not from coal trade, not from arms sales, not from aid from allies, from stolen cryptocurrency. This is not a journalistic hypothesis. This is the conclusion of an international commission working under a Security Council mandate. The $1.5 billion stolen from Bybit is not a crime for profit. It is a line item in a state budget that officially does not exist. In 2025 alone, according to the analytics platform Chainalysis, hackers linked to North Korea stole more than $2 billion, 51% more than the year before. In total, from 2019 to the end of 2025, $6.75 billion. That is 76% of all cryptocurrency thefts in the world. 3/4, one country, one operator. The analytics company TRM Labs, which investigated the hack, put it this way: Lazarus Group is not a state-sponsored group in the usual sense. Lazarus is North Korea, and North Korea is Lazarus. There's no border between the hackers and the regime. There's no gap. It is a single organism. This is where the darkest part of this story begins. Because to understand how a group from one of the poorest and most isolated countries in the world learned to steal billions, we have to go back 20 years, to a place almost no one knows about. A place where children are handpicked in school, not for athletic achievements, not for musical talent, but for the ability to solve math problems faster than anyone else. And where these children are turned into soldiers who will never pick up a weapon, yet will cause more damage than any army. In 1996, Kim Jong-il, then the sitting leader of North Korea, paid a visit to the military on the front lines. According to accounts preserved in South Korean intelligence reports, he uttered a phrase that defined the next 30 years of his country's history. He said, "All future wars will be computer wars." 1996. The internet barely existed. Most people on the planet didn't know what email was. And the man running one of the poorest countries in the world already understood that a keyboard is more dangerous than a tank. Later, in the 2000s, he put it even more bluntly. According to researchers from the organization Hunt and Hackett, who cite South Korean intelligence materials. Kim Jong-il stated that cyber attacks are like atomic bombs. Wars are won by those who gain the most access to the enemy's military and technical information during peacetime. He wasn't joking. He was building an army. In 1998, Bureau 121 was created, a cyber warfare unit within the Reconnaissance General Bureau, the so-called RGB. This isn't some equivalent of an IT department. This is a full-fledged military structure subordinate to the 3rd Technical Surveillance Bureau, the main body responsible for all cyber operations of the DPRK. Early estimates suggested the Bureau employed about 1,800 specialists. By 2014, the South Korean agency Yonhap increased that figure to 5,900. Now, according to the Wall Street Journal, we are talking about 8,000 full-time hackers organized into military units. But where do hackers come from in a country without the internet? The answer is simple and terrifying at the same time. They're cultivated from childhood. A selection system built back in the 90s operates throughout North Korea. Middle and high schools for the gifted are equipped with computers. According to defectors, until recently, these were Pentium 4 level machines. Teachers track children with outstanding mathematical abilities. The best are sent to specialized universities. The main one is Miriam College, also known as the Pyongyang University of Automation. Every year, it graduates about 100 hackers. Jang Se-yul, a defector who studied at Miriam and later fled to South Korea, described what the training process looked like. 6 90-minute sessions every single day. Programming languages, from C to assembly. Operating systems, Linux and Windows. A huge amount of time was spent dissecting the architecture of Microsoft Windows, how it's built, where the vulnerabilities are, how to break into it. 5 years of training. No weekends in the traditional sense, no free internet, only study and practice. Alongside Miriam, the Kim Il-sung University, the Kim Chak University of Technology, and the Moranbong University operate. The most capable are sent there. Kim Hung-kwang, a former computer science professor who taught for 19 years at universities in Hamhung and trained future cyber warriors, revealed after his escape to South Korea that his best students went on internships in China, specifically to the city of Shenyang, where a front company called Chosun Expo Joint Venture operated, a cover through which operatives conducted cyber operations. It was from this company that the FBI later extracted the name of Park Jin-hyuk, the first Lazarus hacker to be indicted. But here's what really hooked me while I was gathering this material. These people are not volunteers, not enthusiasts who decided to become hackers for money or fame. They are state property. They are selected in childhood. Their families receive privileges, housing in Pyongyang, which is a huge luxury in North Korea, food rations, and stipends. In return, the hacker is obligated to work, without the right to choose, without the right to refuse. Defectors say that operatives working abroad live in communal-style dormitories under constant surveillance by intelligence handlers. They have access to the internet, the only ones out of 25 million DPRK citizens. They see how the rest of the world lives. They know the truth. They read the news, see photos of the cities they live in, and yet they don't run, because escape means death for their families. The system is calculated, the hacker is given everything, an apartment, food, status, and in return they take the only thing he has, his loved ones, as hostages. Jang Se-yul described it this way: "It doesn't matter how much you know about the outside world. You won't leave, because then everyone you love will disappear." He himself fled in 2008 and now lives in Seoul, heading an organization of more than 100 defectors, former military personnel. But he is an exception. Most stay, not out of loyalty to the regime, out of fear. Among the materials I found was the story of one operative, a forum pseudonym of course, who worked at one of the front IT companies in Southeast Asia. He wrote that out of his group of 12 people, no one had returned home even once in 5 years. Contact with families is only through a handler. The salary is about $100 to $150 a month. Despite the fact that the group generated hundreds of thousands, he wrote one sentence that I can't get out of my head. We steal money for people who consider us expendable. This isn't cyberpunk romance. This is a system of coercion where talented people are turned into tools, cannon fodder for a digital war. They steal billions and receive nothing. Every dollar goes to the top, to the regime's budget, to the missile program, to the personal funds of the elite. By the beginning of the 2010s, the machine was fully assembled. Thousands of trained operatives dispersed across China, India, Malaysia, and Belarus. A covert infrastructure, front companies, fake identities, servers in dozens of countries, command from Pyongyang, and the first serious target, not a bank, not a stock exchange, not a government, but Hollywood. The morning of November 24th, 2014, was forever seared into the memory of Sony Pictures Entertainment employees. People came to work and discovered their computers were dead. On the screens, an image of a red skeleton and a message from a group calling itself the Guardians of Peace. The text was simple: "We have taken everything, and if you don't meet our demands, we will publish it." This was no exaggeration. The hackers had been inside the Sony network for at least 2 months. According to some reports, up to a year. During that time, they copied more than 100 terabytes of data. Internal management emails, financial documents, personal employee data, social security numbers, medical records, salaries, unreleased films, scripts for future projects, and then they activated malware that destroyed about 70% of the company's server infrastructure. Hard drives were overwritten, boot records erased, computers turned into bricks. The reason? A comedy. The film The Interview with Seth Rogen and James Franco. A satire in which 2 journalists are recruited by the CIA to kill Kim Jong-un. A film that hardly anyone would have remembered 6 months later, if not for Lazarus. The Guardians of Peace demanded that Sony cancel the premiere, and then they began threatening terrorist attacks on theaters that would show the film. Major American chains refused to screen it. Sony initially canceled the premiere, then, under public pressure, finally released the film in limited theaters and online. On December 19th, 2014, the FBI officially stated, North Korea is behind the attack. President Obama spoke publicly, calling the hack not an act of war, but a serious blow to national security. The US imposed additional sanctions, and I, while studying this case, thought about this. A state attacked a private company because of a comedy, not because of intelligence data, not because of military secrets, because of a joke, and caused damage that Sony estimated at $15 million in the first quarter alone, not counting reputational losses and lawsuits from employees whose data was leaked. But the most telling part is that Lazarus used this hack as a training exercise. They tested methods, verified infrastructure, studied the reaction, because the next target was of a completely different caliber. Not an entertainment company, a central bank. On February 5th, 2016, on the night from Thursday to Friday. The perfect time, like in any heist. Lazarus hackers entered the SWIFT system of the Central Bank of Bangladesh. SWIFT is the network through which banks all over the world move trillions of dollars daily. If you control a SWIFT terminal, you can send money anywhere. They infiltrated the system more than a year before the attack. Back in January 2015, one of the bank's employees received an email with a resume from a certain Russell Alam, who was looking for work. Russell Alam did not exist, but the file with his resume contained malicious code that gave the hackers an entry point. Then, months of slow movement from computer to computer until they reached the SWIFT terminals. 35 fake payment orders. The total amount, $951 million. The timing was calculated perfectly. Friday, the end of the work week in New York. Saturday and Sunday, the Federal Reserve Bank is closed. And in Asia, the Chinese New Year was beginning. A long weekend, banks are closed. The hackers were counting on a 3-day window when no one would be checking transactions. And here, when I was digging into the details of this case, I hit a wall. I needed to understand what exactly stopped 30 out of the 35 transactions. The beautiful version that migrated from article to article sounded like this. The hackers made a spelling error in the word foundation, and the automated system blocked the transfer. A story that made the rounds in all major media. Perfect for a headline. A multi-billion-dollar heist, foiled by a typo. But the more I dug, the less it added up. I found the indictment documents from the United States Department of Justice, a report from the National Security Archive, and testimony recorded during the legal proceedings between the Central Bank of Bangladesh and RCBC Bank. The picture turned out to be more complex. A typo did indeed appear, but it only stopped one transaction of 20 million to Sri Lanka, and it wasn't a computer that caught it, but a human being. A Deutsche Bank employee who found not the spelling, but the amount itself suspicious, too large for the recipient country. And the bulk of the transfers, 30 out of 35, were blocked by an entirely different system. The money was headed to RCBC Bank in the Philippines, located on Jupiter Street, and that is where a coincidence occurred that sounds like fiction. Jupiter is also the name of an Iranian oil tanker under American sanctions. The Federal Reserve's compliance system automatically flagged the word as potentially linked to sanctions evasion. One word, a street name. That coincidence saved $850 million. When I found this chain of events, I spent 2 days double-checking every source, because the typo version is convenient, understandable, and fits the narrative well. But the truth is strange, illogical, and far more terrifying. Because if RCBC Bank had been on any other street in Manila, Lazarus would have received not 81 million, but nearly $1 billion. But 81 million went through. The money arrived in fake accounts at an RCBC branch, was cashed out, and sent to Manila casinos. In the Philippines, casinos were not subject to anti-money laundering laws. The bank's security cameras were not working that day. The branch manager who opened the accounts for the transfer was later arrested and convicted of money laundering. By 2025, only 15 million of the 81 million had been recovered. And the printer on the 10th floor of the Central Bank of Bangladesh, which was supposed to automatically print confirmations for all SWIFT transactions, simply stopped working. The hackers had disabled it in advance when technicians fixed the printer on Saturday morning and saw the printouts. It was already too late. The bank tried to contact the Federal Reserve in New York, but it was Saturday. No one answered. $66 million are still listed as missing. Most likely, they have long since turned into what all Lazarus money turns into: missile components and centrifuges for uranium enrichment, 2 heists at one group, Hollywood and a central bank. The world finally began to understand what it was up against, but Lazarus was already preparing an operation that would surpass everything that came before. An operation that would strike not just one company or one bank, but hospitals, factories, and power plants in 150 countries simultaneously. Friday, May 12th, 2017. Afternoon. Chaos begins in British hospitals. Staff arrive at their work computers and see a red screen with a padlock. The text in English: "Your files are encrypted. Pay $300 in Bitcoin within 3 days, or the amount will double. After 7 days, the data will be deleted forever." This is not a drill. This is WannaCry, a ransomware virus that infected over 300,000 computers in 150 countries worldwide in 24 hours. Spain, the telecommunications giant Telefonica; Germany, Deutsche Bahn, the railways; the United States, FedEx; Russia, the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Megaphone. But the most devastating blow fell on the United Kingdom, on the National Health Service, the NHS. 81 hospital trusts out of 236 across England were taken offline. 34 hospitals were infected directly. Another 595 general practices were locked out. Doctors could not access medical records. MRI scanners shut down. Phone systems were unreachable. Ambulances were diverted from infected hospitals to those still functioning. 5 emergency departments were completely closed to patients. Staff switched to pen and paper. In 2017, in a country with one of the most advanced healthcare systems in the world, doctors were writing prescriptions on scraps of paper and passing information between departments via personal mobile phones because the internal network was down. East and North Hertfordshire NHS Trust was one of the first to issue a public statement. The trust is experiencing a major IT problem, suspected to be caused by a cyber attack. We have been forced to shut down our systems. The phone system is also not accepting incoming calls. This was not a technical inconvenience. This was paralysis. I thought for a long time about how to show the scale of WannaCry without it sounding like a set of numbers from a report. And then I found one detail that made everything else unnecessary. 139 people, 139 cancer patients whose appointments were canceled that week, people who were waiting for biopsy results, people who were supposed to be starting treatment, people for whom every day of delay is not an inconvenience, but a matter of life and death. Cancer charities, Macmillan Cancer Support, and Cancer Research UK reported a wave of calls from patients who didn't know what to do or where to go. Their surgeries were postponed, their data locked, and the blame for this lay not with a technical glitch, not with an administrator's error, not with the human factor. The blame lay with a country that had unleashed a digital weapon upon the world. In just 1 week, WannaCry cost the NHS £92 million, 20,000 cancelled surgeries and appointments. And one question that still hangs in the air: what would have happened if the attack had occurred not on a Friday afternoon, but on a Monday morning, when hospitals are operating at full capacity? The fact is, WannaCry was stopped almost by accident. A 22-year-old British cybersecurity researcher known by the handle Malware Tech, it later became known that his name is Marcus Hutchins, was analyzing the virus's code and discovered that the program was reaching out to an unregistered domain name. Every time the virus infected a new computer, it tried to contact this address. If the address did not respond, the virus continued its work. Hutchins registered the domain for $10.86. The virus received a response and stopped. One registration, $10. It was a built-in kill switch that the hackers had apparently installed in case they lost control. Without Hutchins, WannaCry could have run for weeks. The damage would have been measured not in millions, but in billions. And the victims would not just be cancelled appointments. It would seem, what does North Korea have to do with British hospitals? Everything. WannaCry was built on the Eternal Blue exploit, developed by the United States National Security Agency, the NSA. This cyber weapon is a tool for penetrating vulnerabilities in the Windows protocol. The NSA used it for intelligence operations. But in April 2017, the hacker group Shadow Brokers published this tool in the public domain. Microsoft had released a patch closing the vulnerability 2 months earlier, in March. But tens of thousands of organizations around the world had not installed the update. The NHS was running on legacy systems. Some computers were still using Windows XP, which Microsoft had stopped supporting back in 2014. Lazarus took a ready-made American tool and turned it into a weapon of mass destruction. And the victims hadn't updated their security because the update could have disrupted medical equipment. A vicious cycle where everyone is to blame. And no one is. In December 2017, the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom officially accused North Korea of creating and distributing WannaCry. And in September 2018, the United States Department of Justice indicted a specific individual, Park Jin-hyok, a programmer who worked for a front company called Chosun Expo in China, the very same person whose name had surfaced in the Sony case. They charged him with Sony, Bangladesh Bank, and WannaCry. 3 operations, 1 person, 1 group, 1 country. When I was working on this part of the investigation, Something happened that I thought about for a long time before deciding to share. I received a message, not a threat in the traditional sense. No one wrote, "We will find you." It was an account on one of the platforms where I'd been asking questions about the structure of Lazarus. The message was short, a rough translation. You're asking questions that are not worth finding answers to. People who take an interest in this direction usually lose interest in it quickly. The account had been created 2 hours before the message was sent and was deleted 30 minutes later. I don't know who it was. Maybe a random troll? Maybe someone who wanted to get under my skin? Or maybe not. I will say this. I did not stop my work, but I became more cautious. Because it is one thing to read about Lazarus in FBI reports, and quite another to feel that someone on the other side of the screen knows what you are doing. WannaCry became a turning point. The world saw that Lazarus was capable of striking the critical infrastructure of entire countries. But the irony is that the ransomware brought the hackers laughably little money, by various estimates, between $100,000 and $300,000 in Bitcoin. For a group that stole tens of millions from banks, that is pennies. And then Lazarus reached a conclusion that changed everything. Why hack banks if you can steal cryptocurrency? Faster, more anonymous, larger scale, and no broken printers. March 23, 2022, an employee of Sky Mavis, the developer of the blockchain game Axie Infinity, received a message on LinkedIn. A recruiter from a major company was offering a position with a generous salary. Several rounds of interviews. Everything looked professional. In the final stage, the candidate was sent a PDF file with a job description. He opened it on his work computer. That click cost $625 million. Through the infected document, the hackers gained access to the systems of the Ronin network, the blockchain platform on which Axie Infinity operated. They compromised 5 out of 9 validation keys. That was enough to confirm transactions. With 2 transfers, 173,600 units of Ethereum and $25.5 million in the USDC stablecoin, they emptied the Ronin bridge. A fake interview. R1 PDF. 625 million. And here's the detail that makes your skin crawl. Nobody noticed the theft for 6 days. For 6 days, $1.5 billion. At the exchange rate of that time, sat in the hackers' wallets while the platform continued to operate as if nothing had happened. The loss was only discovered on March 29th, when a user couldn't withdraw 5,000 Ethereum. By that moment, Lazarus had already begun laundering through Tornado Cash, a cryptocurrency mixer that was later blacklisted by the United States specifically because of this incident. After Ronin came Atomic Wallet, June 2023, a $100 million stolen from 4,100 individual users. Then WazirX, India's largest crypto exchange, July 2024, 200 million in 1 hour. DMM Bitcoin Japan, May 2024, 308 million. Each attack is more sophisticated than the last, each one faster, each one larger. And then, February 2025, Bybit, 1.5 billion. You and I already know how that went. But now, knowing the whole story, from the students of Mirim to the broken printer in Bangladesh, from the red skeleton on Sony screens to cancelled surgeries in British hospitals, the scale feels different. And Lazarus didn't stop. In April 2026, just 2 months before I record these words, the group struck again. April 1st, the Drift Protocol, 285 million. A 6-month infiltration operation where Lazarus agents attended industry conferences and made deposits on the platform to gain trust. April 18th, Kelp DAO, 292 million. An attack via poisoning the servers that supply data to the verification system. No code hacks, no smart contract bugs, pure manipulation of infrastructure and people. In 2 months, 577 million. 2 attacks, 0 arrests. The total tally, according to Chainalysis, at the end of 2025, was $6.750 billion, including the attacks from early 2026. It is over $7.3 billion, one figure, and there's no need to explain anything else. That is more than the annual GDP of Monaco, Liechtenstein, and San Marino combined. It is more than the budgets of dozens of countries around the world, and all of it was stolen by a group from a state where the population has no internet. Nick Carlson, a former FBI analyst now working at TRM Labs, put it this way: this is an industrial operation. It has specialization, an assembly line, long-term planning, tool development, and a money laundering infrastructure that has survived 3 waves of sanctions. There is nothing comparable in the world of cybercrime. I started this investigation with a single text file found on a Darknet forum. One line: "These are not people. This is a state." Back then, I didn't understand what it meant. Now, I do. Lazarus are not hackers. They are an army. An army without uniforms, without a flag, without territory. It doesn't capture cities. It captures servers. It doesn't take hostages. It takes your money, and it turns it into warheads. Every day, while you read these words, somewhere in Shenyang, in Kuala Lumpur, in Delhi, sits a person who was selected in school for their mathematical talent. They didn't choose this life. They won't see this money, but they will click send, and the world won't notice until it's too late. My name is Mr. Dark Web. Thank you for being with me. Protect your wallets. And remember, in a world where everything is connected to the network, there's no such thing as invulnerability.